Okay. All right, yeah, no problem. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us here at the beautiful Park Place Hotel in Traverse City on this Memorial Day weekend. We are here with the 6 candidates remaining in the race for the Republican gubernatorial primary. We are joined with, I'm going to first bring up Heather Cerrone with Citizens Liberating Michigan to introduce everyone and get us started today. Take it away, Heather.
Republican governor join us today. And we are so honored and blessed to bring this to the people of northern Michigan so that you can get educated and make great educated decisions on this August primary. So thank you for coming. I'm Heather Cerrone. I'm part of the Northern Michigan debate team. We had an amazing group of people put this together. So we're going to go ahead and get started because we are streaming this live. A big thank you to 9 to 10 News and Garrett Lloyd for being a part of this. And we're going to get started right away with a prayer from the Vice Chair of the Michigan GOP, Bernadette Smith.
And it says, this is America. In our great state of Michigan, a white police officer pulled a black young man out of a burning car, saving his life. Color was not the factor. Humanity was not the factor. Saving a life was the factor. The love for a fellow American was the factor. The compassion for a fellow American was the factor. The police officer putting his life on the line was the factor. In our world today, so many people are trying to make everything about race, correct? The race card is being pulled out on every hand inside. It seems like the purpose is to bring division and confusion among us, but we must not allow. And I believe all the candidates here today will not allow. So we're going to continue. Let us go on to prayer. Let's all bow our heads before our Savior. Father, in the name of Jesus, thank you. We thank you for bringing us all here today. Today we want to first remember the heroes who fought and gave their lives for our freedom. We pray a special blessing over the fallen heroes, their loved ones. We pray that we strengthen them and give them great peace and continual comfort. We pray a blessing over this debate today. We ask that you come and visit us all today during this debate. We ask that you give each candidate here today the ability and the wisdom to articulate their message and also their answers. Help each voter to have the discernment and wisdom to choose the right candidate for the days and times that we are living in. We're facing dangerous times today. I pray, Lord, that the understanding that we are in a spiritual fight for our state and our country. This is not a game. We're in a spiritual fight, and we must recognize that. Help us with your wisdom. Help us to restore the power back to the people, and that the people will submit to your will. Help us all to have the humility and love to work together. Help restore back our adherence to the Constitution. Help us to restore good governance back to our great state of Michigan. It is vital that the candidates we choose have this biblical worldview. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Bernadette. We have a special treat with a special 6-year-old. Isabella, are you here to come help us
lead the Pledge of Allegiance. So I just like to ask everyone to stand, please.
Can I turn it? That's my fancy.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please continue standing.
Okay.
Please come join us and sing the national anthem. We have Tudor Dixon that has joined us. We have Ryan Kelley, Michael Markey, Ralph Rebandt, and Kevin Rinke, and Garrett Soldano. So thank you so much. And our moderator again is Lloyd. And then our timekeeper is Franklin County Chairman Robert Henschel. So thank you again for coming, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Heather. Like she said, my name is Eric Lloyd. I am with 9 and 10 News here in beautiful northern Michigan. Now, just some of the rules we're going to do today. We're going to start with a 1-minute opening statement from each of you, and then we will go into the questions where each candidate will have 2 minutes to give their answer. We're going to start in alphabetical order as you're seated, and then it'll rotate through, so the second question will start with Mr. Kelley. But first off, just want to start with Ms. Dixon and give your 1-minute opening statement.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Tudor Dixon. I want to tell you a little bit about myself in case you don't know. My background is manufacturing. My family's been in steel manufacturing my whole life, and that gives you the experience of being in a small company in Michigan, but also understanding what it is to be on the shop floor everywhere up to being an executive working with those folks. We need to make sure that Michigan is friendly to small businesses. We have a Michigan that has crushed business over the pandemic, but Ryan Kelley's administration continues to do so. I am also a wife and a mother of 4 amazing, beautiful daughters, and do doing that, being a mom, I realized what has happened to our education system. It is so important that to make sure that everything in Michigan thrives, it starts with our children, it starts with our future, that we make sure that there is no wrong path in Michigan for our kids, and that's what we want to build together, is a family-friendly Michigan for you. That's why I'm asking you to vote for Tudor Dixon for the next governor of Michigan.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dixon. And now, Mr. Kelley, an introduction.
Good afternoon, Ryan Kelley, candidate for Michigan governor, and we now have a mix-up in the governor's debate and 5 less candidates on the ballot. And there's a poll that came out today showing that now I am the clear front runner in the race. That's very exciting and good news to see. And also, what we've seen in the past from those that were running for office is that they'll tell you what they stand for, but they don't follow up with their actions. Next week, the Mackinac Policy Conference happens on the 2nd of June. There's going to be a governor's debate. The Detroit Chamber is requiring vaccine passports. They're requiring COVID tests, but not for the governor's debate. I have boycotted that event because we need to tell the radical left by our actions that we will no longer tolerate these radical COVID, or maybe it's monkeypox is the next thing that they're going to require these vaccine mandates for, or something along those lines. We have to stand strong by our actions. 65 days from now is the primary. Vote Ryan Kelley as Michigan's next governor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelley. And next, Mr. Markey.
Michael Markey, candidate for governor, business leader, family man, disruptor, and now plaintiff against Jocelyn Benson and the Secretary of State. I am fighting the state because when you accuse somebody of fraud, you better have it right, and they didn't get it right. Their numbers were way off. Their numbers on one of our circulators was off by 400%. If you do that in the business world, you get fired. They said Sierra Brown submitted 465 signatures for us. Do you want to guess how many she actually submitted? None. I brought this up to the media, I've showed it, I've given them the proof. Do you want how many times you've seen it in the media? None. Make no mistake, this is an attack. It's an attack on our democracy, it's an attack on Republicans, it's an attack on conservative values. If you had a term-limited Democratic governor and you had 10 Democratic candidates, do you know how many they'd be throwing off the ballot? None. My name is Michael Markey. I'm fighting this fight, and that's why I want to be your next governor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Markey. Mr. Rebandt.
Our campaign's vision is to make Michigan a lighthouse to the nation. My friends, if we do not get God right in this next election, nothing else will matter. I've shared that message all over Michigan over the past year, and I've had 2 Supreme Court justices, one Democrat, one Republican, who said, Ralph, you have to stick with that message, because if we don't get our Judeo-Christian principles back, we are going to lose everything. The Republicans said, Ralph, while every other candidate is whining about Whitmer, you're showing us a way out. My friends, I invite you to join with us as we look forward to bringing back truth, transparency, and accountability to the state by bringing back righteousness, and I invite you to join with us to make Michigan a lighthouse to the nation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rinke.
My name is Kevin Rinke. We've all seen what poor leadership does to the state of Michigan over the last 4 years. We've experienced it with Gretchen Whitmer. I'm a businessman. I'm an outsider. I believe that Michigan should be the place to be. Not just the state, but the state. See, I think that creating an environment for the citizens of the state to be successful in emulates everything that Michigan is about. We'll create an educational system that's world-class. We'll create a business climate that's world-class. We will keep integrity, families, and our state first. I'm a businessman. I'm an outsider. I'd ask that you support me as we make Michigan #1 again.
Thank you, Mr. Rinke. Mr. Soldano.
Hello. My name is Garrett Soldano. If you want to make God laugh, you tell him your plans. Never would have imagined 2.5 years ago I'd be in this position. Now, when you run for governor, it's your time to prove to the state of Michigan that you know how to build something from nothing, how to effectively organize, how to structure, how to lead. Your campaign is a direct reflection of how you're going to run the state. And that's what we've been able to do over the past year. We have out-fundraised every single candidate on this table combined. Over $2 million. 96% of that money comes from within the state of Michigan. 96% of that under the amount of $200. What does that tell you? That's grassroots, baby. And we were the first candidate to get on the ballot, and now finding out over this past week how important that was. Every single signature that we got on that ballot was grassroots powered, not one paid circulator. And while everyone else was scrambling around to get those signatures, we were organizing and activating Michigan's greatest asset, we the people, our grassroots army, to continue to hammer down. And we have door knocked over 15,000 doors and called over 120,000 people in the last 4 weeks. We are in this thing to win it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soldano. Now, as you saw, candidates, how the timing is going to work here, Rob will hold up his signs. Thank you all for sticking to the minute. You guys have rehearsed this. That's good. So we're going to move to the first questions. We have 8 of them, and then we'll go to the additional questions if we have time. We're going to start with Ms. Dixon. Again, you have 2 minutes to answer. In the last few years, we've experienced business shutdowns, vaccine mandates, and extensive government control. Did you fight against any of these? How? And then many businesses have been permanently damaged, many jobs have been lost. As governor, what would you do to protect Michigan businesses and families from harmful responses like this in the future?
Yeah, I started really fighting for conservative values in 2017 when I left my job in manufacturing to speak out for children's voices in middle and high school. Then eventually moved on to a conservative network where we were amplifying all of these things so that people across the country could hear exactly what was happening in the state of Michigan. We were trying to make sure everybody knew exactly how bad the things that were happening in Michigan were, because let's not forget, Gretchen Whitmer was running to be Vice President of the United States, and we had to make sure everybody knew what we were suffering here in the state of Michigan. And when we look back at the way she handled COVID, we now know what she knew, which was that she knew we should not put people in nursing homes that were COVID positive. Those of us who had here, grandparents and parents in nursing homes, couldn't go in even with a negative test. But if you were really positive, you were welcome in nursing homes. It was outrageous. We also know that this governor knew what was happening with unemployment, and she threw our taxpayer dollars away. We know that she was aware of this, and she allowed it to happen. We also know that she went after our restaurants, she went after people vindictively, individually. These were all things that are outrageous ways to run a government, and also perfect ways to crush a state. We will bring our state back. If we could look back at COVID, we would know that our kids should have been in school. What she took away from our children was devastating. I personally have a daughter who was taken out of school, and at 10 years old, she looked at me and she said to me, "Mom, I think I'm depressed. Is this what depression feels like?" People forget. Kids couldn't even go play next door. They couldn't go outside. What happened to this state was devastating, but we know we can bring this state back. We know we can bring policies to the state with world-class education to make sure our businesses thrive and our families have a great Michigan with the American dream present.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Kelley, same question to you.
Can you repeat the question just so we all hear it again? It was a long question.
The vaccine mandates, the business shutdowns, extensive government control, how did you fight against that and how so? And then if you were governor, how would you handle a pandemic in the future?
Actions definitely speak louder than words. On April 30th, 2020, I held a rally at the Capitol building that received national attention. We were there to get the Senate to vote no on Governor Whitmer's extension of the state emergency declaration. We inspired the entire nation that day to stand up against these lockdowns. Protests happened all over the country. Those were actions that we took against Gretchen Whitmer. I hosted several rallies up there at the Capitol. When BLM and Antifa were burning down cities and destroying statues with their Marxist revolution, I stood in our town, Allendale, Michigan, to keep that Civil War statue from being torn down and did not let BLM and Antifa destroy our city. We did that armed, and we made sure we were protecting American history. I hosted the Stop the Steal rallies during the 2020 fraudulent election because I was speaking out against what was going on at the time, and that was long before I decided to run for governor. Doing the right thing at the right time, taking actions, fighting for our country. It's not about check marks that you have on a website, your talking points. It's about what you do. I was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th as well, standing up against the stolen election, saying we wanted to get our voices heard. As governor, we need to look at taking the power away from these unelected bureaucrats that think they have this unconstitutional power and this authority to go ahead and violate our God-given, our constitutionally protected rights. We need to make sure that we're rolling back these laws that give the authority to these bureaucrats. Also, we need to stop taking federal dollars that continue to plague our state budget and continue to plague all of our agencies across the state of Michigan. Federal dollars fund the Department of Health and Human Services almost 75%. And then Washington, D.C. wants to control us, tell us vaccine mandates, tell us masks on kids at school. The state of Michigan needs to be a sovereign state that controls our own budget with our own funds and tells Washington, D.C. they can go pound sand. 10th Amendment, we need strong governors to take our state and our country back. Do it with your actions, not with your words.
Thank you, Mr. Kelley. Mr. Markey.
Yeah, so my wife and I, we've got a radio show. We talked about this. We supported our employees in multiple businesses, continue to pay them even when they're at home. We supported paid mortgage for people that were impacted by COVID. So it's not just what you did, it's also what you're going to do. So one of the things is Governor Whitmer wants to make Michigan carbon neutral by 2050. I think we need to shift that focus and make Michigan independent of federal dollars by 2040. 22.46% of our budget right now comes from the federal government. So you can't tell me we have independence and we're going to be able to protect our state's rights if you are relying on federal. But I can also tell you, I'm facing this right now. Overreach, are you kidding me? Because, when you have 2 months to write a report to accuse fraud, you better get it right. And when you say that Indira Radcliffe submitted 1,980 signatures, when in fact she submitted 470, that's off by almost 400%. In the real world, what is that called? You would be fired. You have to get it right. When you're going to put somebody's reputation on the line, you get it right. And so what is this? See, when I look at this, I see this as the Democratic Party trying to take more control. They first stole an election, then what did they do? Then they had COVID, they shut down our churches, and now they're picking on a normal person. Why? Because they didn't think I was strong enough. They didn't think I had the resources to fight back. But I will fight back. Because this is a fight worth fighting, not just for me, but for all of our elections, grassroots included. Because what they're trying to do makes all elections vulnerable. It is time that we send them a message that you cannot push around this party. We will not be pushed around, and you cannot take things that aren't yours. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight. And I'm going to win. You're not going to take it. That's why I want to be next governor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Markey. Mr. Rebandt.
I equate my involvement in this whole issue of COVID lockdowns to someone dialing 911 and getting the emergency crew out, and then someone who deals with the aftermath. I have dealt with the aftermath. I have counseled young people, parents, adults, children, police officers who are suicidal, young people who thought their lives were over, thinking that everybody was going to die of COVID, thinking that their lives were over, that they would not even have the opportunity to go back to school. So when you want to know what I did, my counseling was primarily behind the scenes, not only as a pastor, but as someone who has served law enforcement all over the state. Those are the things that I primarily did. But we put a sign out in front of our church that said worship is essential. That's what we had on 8 Mile. When people drove by, they knew that our church stood for public gatherings. Folks, we went to Target without masks on, and it was almost hilarious watching the people freak out around us. But we did that, and then they called the store manager. Those are things that we did in our way to help eliminate this fear. But one of the biggest things I did is, as I looked ahead, knowing that a governor has to be able to see the big picture. That's why I started out with talking about our vision is to make Michigan a lighthouse to the nation. A governor has to be able to see the big picture. And one of the things that I did, as I was thinking and praying about running for governor, is I tapped on the shoulder of a man named Dr. Randy Baker. Dr. Baker sued Governor Whitmer in May. And I talked to him about the vaccines, the jab, the shot. I talked to him about the response to all this. He's the one that sued Whitmer, and it was his case that unlocked Michigan. October 2nd, 2021. My friends, I'm running to protect you and your children, and I will not only protect them publicly, but internally as well, in their heart and soul.
Thank you, Mr. Rebandt. Mr. Rinke.
In times of trouble, citizens of a state look to their leadership to make good decisions, to respect the rule of law, to respect government for what it stands for. And Gretchen Whitmer violated that. The last resort is autocracy before chaos. And Gretchen Whitmer tried to exert autocracy as she governed our state through the vaccines. So what did I do? I worked with businesses. I didn't comply to face masks. I encouraged friends not to. I researched and I challenged. I contacted friends in the military. I'm very, very active with Wounded Warriors, and got real-time data that challenged. I contacted judges directly and encouraged them to enforce the laws of the state. And I believe that many of them ultimately got strength from that. See, leaders have to look forward for all their people. Leaders have to not practice political science, they have to practice medical science. And that means challenging opinions that are validated. We call it a vaccine today. It's an experimental drug. These mandates were proven to be ineffective. They have emotionally challenged our children. They have hurt them educationally. The socialization process with how people treat each other has dissolved because we've lost faith in our government. And we rely more on faith today as a group and our Judeo-Christian values and how that interacts with government to get our order back and to take back Michigan for you.
Thank you. Mr. Soldano.
Well, like many people in this room, when this all went down, we were waiting for somebody in a position of authority, somebody as an elected official, somebody in a position of power to stand up for us. And what did we hear? We heard crickets. And so now it's time for ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And so I started that Facebook group, which grew to hundreds of thousands of people in 3 days. And we started doing calls of action. And that's one thing that we have right now is a movement. And this movement is engaged, it is passionate, it is energized. And we start hammering the legislature and blowing up their emails and phones as we were hammering down on them. And isn't it funny? It took we the people to give the legislature a backbone. That's why I'm a chiropractor. To stop this state of emergency, to stop this unnecessary, unconstitutional lockdowns. And Facebook took us down, and I co-founded Stand Up Michigan, which we started to hold protests and rallies throughout this state, not where hundreds came, but thousands. Thousands to come to this little thing that we all took for granted called our freedom. And then we went a step further, and we started that Unlock Michigan campaign, and we spearheaded that, where 539,000 Michiganders hammered down and got that citizen's petition to go after that very law that that governor was using against us. But when the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the legislature, I thought my job was done because I made a vow to every single one of you that I would not quit until we restored the checks and balances of our beloved state to make sure that no governor can ever do this again. I never knew in a million years that this governor could weaponize the health department. And that's exactly what she did. She hammered down on our kids, took away their experiences, their opportunities and dreams, took these restaurants down to 25% capacity, while all the other people in union were working up. And this governor doubled down. I led the charge to get these businesses patrons during December and January. We led the charge to get these kids back to school, to get them back in athletics. We will not stop, and as this movement continues to grow, we will take back our state and lead the charge to take back our country in 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Soldano. Now we move on to the second question, and we will start with Mr. Kelley this time around. Over 41 election security bills have been proposed in the Michigan legislature. Of these, only 11 have made it to the governor's desk, where all 11 were vetoed. If you were governor, what bills for election security and integrity would you like to see arrive at your desk for your signature? And was the 2020 election a fair election?
Start with the second question first, and the answer is absolutely not. And all of those bills that you're talking about that the legislature brought to the governor's desk, that's all weak. That's all lip service, because if they really truly believe in election integrity, our legislators need to decertify the 2020 election. Take real action to show us that you mean business. Otherwise, they're just sending bills to the governor's desk and coming back to their constituents and saying, well, we tried, but Whitmer just vetoed them. You know, what do we do? You take action that you can do that will correct what happened. We see 2,000 mules, right? Who saw 2,000 mules, right? We know, lots of hands there, we know that there's enough suspicious activity that there should be a nationwide investigation, just like with January 6th, right? When's the billboards come up all around the country looking for any mules or organizations that corrupted the 2020 election? Look, day number 1 with Governor Kelley, this is on my 100-day plan. I encourage you all to grab a copy of my 100-day plan. Day number 1 with Governor Kelley, we terminate the Dominion, the ES&S, and the HART electronic voting machine contracts in the state of Michigan. I've been working with Christina Caramo, our amazing Secretary of State nominee that's going to unseat Jocelyn Benson this November. There is amazing things that we can do in order to put things in place. Voter ID, I want to see, is a piece of legislation that I signed. Uniform ballot printing, right? No illegals allowed to vote in our election system. Paper ballots only, right? No more of these electronic voting machines. There's other components that we can have in regard to the qualified voter file, not allowing dead people on the qualified voter file. Wow, what a novel idea, right? You know, if somebody dies, they come off the qualified voter file. My Michigan First policy agenda, you can find on my website, spells out several other aspects of the election integrity component, and we see that not only here in Michigan, but across the United States, so many voters were disenfranchised. Let me tell you what, my friends, let me encourage you, we have a hopeful future. Do not give up on America or our election cycle. Go vote Ryan Kelley August 2nd.
Thank you very much. Mr. Markey.
Yeah, so I've been on record saying something to the contrary of what I'm going to say today, going through what we've gone through in the last week. You know, I remember hearing Mr. Colbeck talk about how he took evidence to a judge, and the judge just wouldn't look at it. And I'm like, nah, that's not the way our world works. I had evidence this week. We took it in front of a canvasser board, and you know what they told me? Nah. So, yeah, I have significant and severe issues now with the 2020 election. Further, what would I pass? I think the bills that our Republican legislators have put forth are good starts. And what else would we do? Number 1, we would clean up the voter rolls. It shouldn't be that hard. Number 2, we need to enforce election laws. This is important. We can't change laws midstream. We can't change processes and procedures. They are laws for a reason. And here's what happens. When you tell the public a law isn't worth enforcing, what you're really saying is no law is worth enforcing. Number 3 is we must have ID verification. Now understand, the people on the left, they tell us that that's going to suppress voters in 4 communities. So let's just flip that script. Let's make it that if you're eligible for an ID, money will never be in the way of you getting that ID. Businesses will love us now, because think about it. All these people without an ID cannot go to a restaurant and drink. Now they can go drink and vote. Hopefully not in that order. You know what, though? If they do, the election results might make a little bit more sense. So I've been there. I'm fighting it. And, yeah, it's changed my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Mr. Rebandt.
First of all, hello, you there, everybody out there. If anyone has not seen the 1,000 mules, if you go to my table after this, I'm sorry, we'll double it. It's 1,000 in Michigan. If you haven't seen that, please go to my table after this event. We are giving away 100 DVDs so that you can see that for yourselves, what happened during the election. Friends, I was at the TCF Center. I was the only candidate inside the TCF Center and saw the fraud. I got in because I have a police badge. The Michigan Chiefs of Police have endorsed me, the Southeastern Chiefs have unanimously endorsed me as their candidate for governor. By the way, on this very issue of election integrity, Mike Lindell has endorsed me as his candidate for governor. And the reason why is because I stood up. I was not only in the TCF Center, but I filed an affidavit with Trump's attorneys. I filed an affidavit with the state. I went a week later to the state and was going to share my testimony. It was a dog and pony show. I'll share that out later. I only have 60 seconds left. But friends, we have to, in addition to what we heard today, these things, we have to cut out the Zuckerberg box. I'm pushing for same-day results. When I was a kid, there was not, we waited a week to find out who won. We found out that night, and people were counting ballots. I would not only have what Ryan said with paper ballots, but I'd have them watermarked. Friends, this is a significant issue because unless we get this voting issue right, we lose. We lose our constitutional republic, and that's how significant and important this is. Please come by our table and get a free DVD.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rinke.
The most sacred thing we have is a vote, and it's government's responsibility to ensure that it is a safe, honest, fair election. Gretchen Whitmer just recently vetoed a bill that said it's a felony to vote more than once. Gretchen Whitmer vetoed a bill that said we need to have clean voter rolls, and that included proper registration. Look, there's no question. We can see movies. We don't need movies to prove that there was fraud. Maybe the greatest fraud ever in the history of our country. We know that there were voter irregularities. Many of you received multiple applications for ballots, as did I. We know that the Supreme Court, the Democratic-controlled Supreme Court, has ruled twice against the Whitmer administration for their actions in this past election. Look, this is some radical stuff that I proposed. People need to be alive to vote. And Gretchen Whitmer said I was a radical. People need to be registered properly and citizens in the state. She sent out a note and said I'm a radical. People need to be breathing with voter ID, and that was radical too. Government accuracy is at our hands. Going forward, when I am your governor, I will ensure that we have voter ID. I will create a special unit through the state police that will be randomly checking voter sites, that will aggressively pursue and stop any irregularities the night of the election. And we will make sure that you get one vote, that it counts, and that every Michigander who has a right to vote will be represented, and so will I as your governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Soldano.
Well, we all went to bed that night in the November election, and we were winning. And then we woke up the next morning, and we were losing. And we were losing big. And all of us were scratching our heads why. And just like all these other candidates have told you today, go watch 2,000 Mules. It's right there. The video evidence is there. And look, they're right. The legislature actually did their job. They passed dozens of bills. And this governor has vetoed every single one. Common sense solutions. But I'm not a politician, folks. I'm one of you. And I'm not the type of guy that's going to give you a bunch of lip service and tell you what we're going to do once we get in there. I'm doing everything that I can right now to secure the 2022 election. That's why we've been trying to circulate that Secure Michigan petition to make sure that we're expanding on voter ID, that we're getting rid of these ballot harvesting, the mass mailings of these absentee ballot applications. So I'm not going to sit on the sideline and give you lip service. This movement that we're a part of, we're taking action now. And I'm also proud to say that we've been helping these grassroots organizations like Stand Up Michigan, Pat Colbeck, and even the Michigan GOP to recruit what's called licensed election inspectors. So we can make sure that 2022 is legit and it's integrous. That's what we have to do. We have to get out of this mentality that we're waiting for an elected official to do everything for us. You need to get involved now. You can no longer sit on the sidelines. You can no longer sit in the bleachers and wait for someone else to do it. We're done with all that. It's about we the people now getting involved. It's about we the people continually getting involved. And if we do that, and if we secure that 2022 election, we're going to get in. And we're going to change things. And we're going to just bring some common sense solutions, folks. Expand voter ID. Get rid of ballot harvesting. Get rid of the Zucker boxes. Stop the mass mailing of absentee ballot applications. Just common sense, and that's what I'm going to bring to the table as your next governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soldano. Ms. Dixon.
When we look at the 2020 election, we have to ask ourselves, why would you change the rules right before unless you wanted to do something fishy? And when you look at this Secretary of State, when she was campaigning, she said, we don't need voter ID because we've got the signature match. So if she thought the signature match was that important, why reduce the signature match requirement unless you wanted to do something fishy with the election? So yeah, I think there's problems with what happened in 2020. And I'm concerned that if we don't protect it ahead of time, that there'll be problems again. And this is something that you can help with. All of us up here running want to make sure this election is secure. But right now, Secure My Vote petition is out there. And all of those bills that we're talking about, that mirrors those bills to make sure that our elections from now on are secure. And that's something that the people can do. We're asking you all to stand up and sign that petition. But if you can't, if that petition doesn't pass, then heck yeah, we're going to get in there and pass those bills. We are going to make sure that our elections are secure, and we never have a chance of somebody rigging the system again. Because we don't want anybody that can get into power that can rig the system against us. We have to make sure that we have voter ID, that we don't send absentee ballot applications out to everybody in the state, because I don't know about you, but I had a friend who got 7 absentee ballot applications. And guess what? When you combine that with, $12 to $20 million worth of Zuckerbucks, that's a lot of ballot harvesting that can be accomplished. We have got to ban ballot harvesting, get rid of Zuckerbucks, make sure our elections are secure. We can do that. We, the people, can do that. But as your governor, I guarantee you we will have secure elections in the state of Michigan.
Thank you. I wanted to go back through because I want to make sure we got answers. Mr. Kelley gave us his direct answer on 2020 being a fair election. But Mr. Markey, you said you changed your idea. Was 2020 a fair election?
No.
Mr.
Definitely not.
Mr. Rinke?
Couldn't have been with the way it was conducted.
President Trump is still my president.
And Ms. Dixon?
2020 was not fair.
Okay. All right, next on to the third question. This one's going to go to Mr. Markey first. Michigan, and this is directly to the people running for governor. Michigan is one of the few states, with no requirements for candidates running for office for the legislature or the governor's office to disclose basic financial records, including income sources, business investments, gifts, and travel compensations. Should a statement of economic interest disclosure be the law?
Yes, it should. We need more disclosure, and somebody as a advisor who has to disclose conflicts of interest, this seems basic to me. As an advisor, when you have a conflict of interest that one product or company may be skewing your opinion, we have to disclose that to our clients. Why don't politicians have to do that? You have to ask yourself, why do people in Congress get to know about publicly traded information and they're able to trade on it? That's not right. That's not the way the world should work, and that's not the way it works for most people. So we not only need to, one of the things that people keep asking for is tax returns. And I'm telling you that I don't think tax returns is the right way to go, because it doesn't show enough. A tax return isn't going to show trades that you make in your brokerage account, unless, of course, they're outside of an IRA, or you actually made those trades made sales within that year. So it's easy. If you just do a tax return, we need to stop fighting for that, because if you get a tax return, you're going to get misled, and you're not going to see the full picture. You need full financial disclosure. People should show you what their holdings are. And let's take it a step further. When you want to hold a statewide office, all of your investments need to go into a blind trust. That should just be a basic requirement. Blind trust. And take away some of that conflict of interest. And by the way, put in a blind trust, that still has to make public disclosures. Let the public know what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. That's what transparency is, and that's what we should have.
Mr. Rebandt.
Yes, I agree that our financial reports should indeed be available to all Michiganders. As a pastor, mine is very short. But I'm laying up treasures in heaven, by the way. But I would just like to add this, that since May 10th, 2021, I have been calling for Michigan to become an open record state. Right now, the governor can hide behind FOIA requests, delay those answers. Folks, I'm not looking just for when I'm governor. I want the next governor to have to be open and transparent with you. Michigan is only one of two states, Michigan and Maine, that does not require to give away the records of the state. So on that level, yes, I'm in favor of it at the state level. I'm in favor of it at the personal level. The reason why I say that is because on this insurance reform, you know, Governor Whitmer was touting her insurance reform at the State of the State address. And I would like to know, out of the legislators who voted for that, how many of them are getting paid from the lobbyists for insurance? Because that was not insurance reform. You might be happy with your $400, but I'm not happy with that. Last thing I'll say real quick, corporate welfare. We need to find out, in terms of transparency, what's going on in the government from our own legislators. Because over the last 30 years, $900 billion of your own money has been wasted in corporate welfare. Explain more later. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rinke, I'm told that your mic isn't working, so if you could either use either Mr. Rebandt's or Mr. Soldano's. Thank you.
This one okay?
That should work.
Great, thank you. Look, I think transparency is good. And at one point in time, Gretchen Whitmer ran on transparency and opening up FOIA within state government. Problem is she forgot, like so many things that she's done or said. See, we'd know who paid for Gretchen's airplane ride to Florida when she went to see her dad, when you were restricted from seeing your parents. We'd know who's whining and dining her, and in fact, we might even know who paid for the boat to get put in. All that being said, government needs to be accountable. You give up things when you choose to publicly serve that a private citizen can maintain. And the level of transparency required to ensure that you are ethically acting on the people's behalf versus your personal behalf needs to be addressed. Needs to be addressed. I'll make FOIA for the government. Michigan is one of two states that currently does not require it. I'll make FOIA for every person in government absolutely an integral part of our government going forward. And I've got 30 seconds left, but you know what? I'm going to give it to Garrett because transparency is good, FOIA will be there, and it's the right thing to do.
All right. To be clear, you still only have 2 minutes, Mr. Soldano. Garrett's good.
Was mine okay?
Yeah.
Good.
You want this one? Sure, I guess so.
Is this better?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. That didn't go against my time, right?
No, now it starts.
All right.
I gave you 30 seconds.
That's right. You just said I couldn't have it. Now look, he's right. Kevin Rinke is right. Governor Whitmer ran on 2018 saying she was going to be the most transparent governor in the history of Michigan. And she came out with a Sunshine Plan 1.0. And guess how many of those points she got done? 0. And so our campaign came up with an unbelievable step 2. We called it Sunshine Plan 2.0. And with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to get FOIA request the executive and legislative branches. We're going to open the books at Lansing. We're going to find out who's lobbying who. Who are you getting money from? We are the most corrupt state politically in the union, and that's because of these 501c4 slush funds. So we're going to open those books, and we're going to find out where they're getting this money. Who's paying these people? And that's what we need to do. And to expand on it, tax returns, let's go full. Let's go full financial disclosure. Let's find out what you're investing in. And you know what we're going to do? I'm not going to sign that as an executive order because I think we're all sick and tired of the rhinos in Lansing, and I think that's on most of the aisle, right? Will we agree with that? This is how we're going to expose them. Because how many people in Lansing are excited about Garrett Soldano's Sunshine Plan 2.0? Not too many. We're going to have them write us a bill. And we're going to find out who's on our side. And time is we the people to vote them out because every elected official should want truth and transparency. Every elected official who represents all of you should be willing to open up their books and show us who they are invested with. That's important for all of us because we all want truth and transparency now. And I think it's one of our goals for all these candidates on this table is to restore faith in government. And I know that's an oxymoron, but we need to get it done.
Because if we lose faith in our government, our republic is over. And so again, we have to get involved, and we're going to get it done. Sunshine Plan 2.0 is going to be a reality, folks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dixon.
Freshman Whitmer ran on a few things: transparency, clean water, and good roads. Hasn't really accomplished any of those, but what I'm really concerned about, and I do believe that financial disclosure is important in all areas, what I'm really concerned about is these dirty deals. How did she take our taxpayer dollars and make a secret deal with the Director of Health and Human Services to leave this state and none of us know why? Transparency is key in government. We have experienced more corruption than most states. It's absolutely time for the people to go back into Lansing and make sure that you know exactly what is going on. If there is an elected official that has some sort of a special interest, isn't that your business? Shouldn't you know what's going on with these people? What we're seeing in Congress? What about even in the federal government, where you have a slush fund for people who have been accused of something and we don't know what they were accused of and who they hurt? Enough is enough. Our elected officials have to be held to a higher standard. If you're going to serve the people, you've got to be willing to put everything on the line. And that means your financial disclosure and any past behavior as well. We want to hold everyone accountable. You're representing us. You better make sure that the people representing you are representative of who you are as well.
Thank you. Mr. Kelley.
Will you repeat the question, please?
Yes, Michigan is one of the few states that do not require financial disclosure of business investments, gifts, travel, compensations. Should that be the rule of law here in Michigan?
As we've seen throughout the decades, the special deals, the special interest deals, and those that get into office that lie. They cook the books. They tell you there should be transparency. Hasn't that been a talking point forever? Government should be more transparent. Government should be more transparent. We need good moral people running for office. That's a huge component, is that we have corrupt people that run for office. So we pass laws that say there should be transparency, you should disclose this, you should disclose that. Are you getting the real information? Are they giving you the honest answer? Now, to answer the question directly, I absolutely agree that there should be legislation that anyone running for public office disclose their financial interests. I think that that's important because, as some of the other individuals up here have stated, it can help connect the dots of who's in whose pocket, right? Who's funding who? What special interests do you have that maybe legislation that you sign will benefit one specific industry or something? We must look at the overlooming component here, that we have to have moral, good people running for office. Because again, anybody can check the box. Oh, we need transparency in government. We're going to be so transparent. That's what Gretchen Whitmer said. Everybody was sitting in the office going, yeah, Gretchen, that's what we need, right? How did that work out? So with the good legislation that we sign can be a component of it, but finding those individuals that will run for office that will actually tell the truth, that's a whole nother component right there, my friends. And so that's one component that we need to, as we elect these people, determine who we can believe and who we can trust. So the legislation, I believe, needs to happen, and the good moral people need to follow.
Thank you very much. On to the next question, we will start with Mr. Rebandt. Because of COVID, the students here in Michigan were learning virtually. Many parents feel they lost control of their students' education in the classrooms. Now, many of these decisions came from the state, but also from the U.S. Department of Education. Are you in favor of abolishing the U.S. Department of Education? And then also, how should education be funded here in the state?
Yes, I don't think we need the U.S. Department of Education. We got along just fine without it. We do not need the federal government telling us what we need to do. We have a 10th Amendment that tells us that what's not given to the federal government is automatically to the states. And so, yes, I believe that's the case even in education. I happen to believe that education should go down to the lowest level. That is, we should have, I should say local level, the local level. Parents, according to the Michigan School Code 380.10, parents and legal guardians have the responsibility for what their kids learn. Not what the Democratic Party said in a Facebook post a months ago, that they have the responsibility, but it's you as parents have that responsibility. My friends, I have said on the campaign trail that I would dismantle the public school system and rebuild it with parental involvement. That's what we need to do. It's that bad. I would put vouchers out there for parents. In fact, right now, there's a case before the Supreme Court. It's called Carson versus Macon, right out of Maine, and it's going to open up the opportunity, as did Espinoza in 2020, to be able to allow states to be able to give tax money to parents. Now, I have another plan because I don't want the money to follow the student. I don't want the government to follow the money. I do want the money to follow the student and the government not to follow the money. But I have another plan to reduce property taxes so that we're not simply flipping money from one hand to the next and paying government employees to take that money. But here's my point. On the educational thing, folks, it is the parent's responsibility. And I would make it a felony that if somebody gives a puberty-blocking drug to a student, that is a felony. If they give the COVID shot to a student, that is a felony. I would remove sex ed from the public school system and replace it with rural health and critical race theory and replace it with rural American history. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rebandt. Mr. Rinke.
Since we implemented the U.S. Department of Education at the federal level, education has gone down in America. It's failed us. Here's what I'd like Michigan's education to look like. Currently, it's the fastest falling in the country. I want to focus our education plan on educating kids, reading, writing, arithmetic. I want them to have physical activity so they can burn off their steam like kids need to do. We don't need kids to go to school to learn about gender, critical race theory. We don't need mandates or shutdowns that are hurting our children both mentally and educationally. Parental rights need to be guaranteed, not only for the right to speak at school boards, but also to participate in curriculum. Any school board or entity that targets parents should be charged with a crime. Sports, biological boys and girls get to compete against their biological people. Vocational tracks, we've eliminated them in public schools, and skilled labor is what we need to strengthen the middle class. We need to re-implement it. The Let Michigan Kids Learn initiative is a really good start and a possibility, but it doesn't do enough because it doesn't address the needs of special ed kids. The key is to eliminate the Blaine Amendment. And in between eliminating Blaine, we need to get workarounds, and we need to get those fast. The money should go with the kids. They're who we should focus on, and that's what's important, not bureaucracy in any instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rinke. Mr. Soldano.
So should we abolish the Department of Education? No, I feel we need to reform it, we need to look at it, we need to audit it. We have to make sure that this money actually trickles down to the kids, because they're always touting how much money these kids are getting individually depending on what type of school system that they're involved in. Bottom line, look, we do not have a teacher problem in this state. You understand that? It is not a teacher problem. It is a teacher union problem and an administration problem in this state. And see, that's one thing that we have learned watching Virginia, a blue state that turned red. Why? Because you don't co-parent with the government with our kids. You don't mess with mama bears and grandma bears. They are ferocious beasts, right? And that is one thing that we must continue to do, is inspire patient or parent involvement. To continue to have these parents. I don't care if President Biden calls you a domestic terrorist, wear it like a badge of honor. You parents, you grandparents, you need to get involved at the school level. If those school boards aren't representing you, then you vote them out. If the superintendents aren't representing you, then you get on the school board and you fire them. I'll handle the teacher unions and the administration at the state level, but we need parent involvement. As your next governor, I will be banning CRT on day one. That is a racist belief system ruled in the flawed ideas of Marxism. I will get rid of this gender theory and sexual theory just like Governor DeSantis did in the state of Florida. Man, if you want to teach my kid anything, why don't teach my kid critical thinking, critical math skills, critical science skill. You can teach my kid how to think, but you have no right to teach my kid what to think. My child should never know what side of the aisle that teacher is on, whether it's Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent. They should never know. You keep back to the basics. And you're going to have a leader that's going to stand behind these parents, stand behind these kids, because as Michigan's next governor, I will always stand up for the ones who can't stand up for themselves, these kids.
Thank you, Mr. Soldano. Now, Ms. Dixon, I think he called you a mama bear. Your turn.
That's an accurate statement, too, which is why education is so important to me. But it is meant to be something that is held at the state level. We do not need a federal Department of Ed. We need to be monitoring education from a state level. It's very important, and that should be the parents' choice. We need parents to be back in their child's education. I know this firsthand. I had studied choice in education for years, but I was in a district where on paper I didn't think I'd ever need choice. So some people will tell you not every child needs choice. You don't know what child needs choice, but mom and dad do. Because my daughter, when she went to elementary school to middle school, she got lost and she started to fail. And she cried every night and told me, Mom, I don't fit in this school. We moved her to another school and she's thriving now. She was the lead in the school play this year, and that's why I personally am so passionate about making sure that dollars follow the child. It is time to make sure that parents are involved in education, and people tell me we want parents involved in education. Then give them the chance. Make sure that they can be involved in education. That's how you get them to realize that their child's education is going to come from the choices that they make for their kids. It is key. And also, we want education to be focused on education. We want our children we want to make sure our children can read. In this state, 50% of our third graders just failed their literacy exam. We are failing at a state level in education, but we can take that back and make sure that we are offering every child a world-class education and that there is no wrong path for any child in Michigan. That is what I am passionate about. That is what our parents are passionate about. And I have people say to me, well, you want to get rid of bad books and bad curriculum. Yeah, heck yeah. If I can't go down to my school bus stop and read a book without being arrested, it sure as heck better not be in a classroom. I think you all agree with that.
Thank you. Mr. Kelley.
Want
Do
to
it
repeat
again.
the question, please, so we all know what we're answering?
Yes. Are you in favor of abolishing the U.S. Department of Education? And then, if so, or without it, how should education be funded here in Michigan?
If you read Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, it lays out what the role of the federal government is. Nowhere in there does it say anything about the Department of Education. So not only am I in favor of completely eliminating it, it's unconstitutional. And we need to call that out because we have a federal government that has grown way beyond its scope of authority constitutionally. Second of all, Ralph, if you're going to steal my ideas, you got to give me credit. And I see that the other two down there have read my 100-day plan, which is very exciting. I believe that the federal government funding our Department of Education is what has continued to plague our state. 94% of the Department of Education for the state is funded by the federal government, which is why we have things like Common Core, diversity, equity, and inclusion, critical race theory, social emotional learning, Common Core, all of these things that continue to plague our students. We tell the federal government no. Governor Kelley will not sign a budget in the state of Michigan that has any federal dollars attached to our Department of Education. Now, the school aid fund is what we use to give the money to the schools to execute everything, and we see that we have enrollment is down, and we see that spending is up. Gretchen Whitmer now wants $18.4 billion to the school aid fund, yet we have third graders that cannot read. Those dollars need to, come from the state so that we can control our education here. Day number one with Governor Kelley, I will sign an executive directive eliminating all of the DEI positions across all of our state government. No more racial bias training. As a matter of fact, DEI positions in themselves, they violate the Michigan Constitution, Article 1, Section 26. It's all discrimination. And it needs to be eliminated from our Department of Education. We need to eliminate critical race theory the same way and social emotional learning. And we need to fund our schools with our state dollars and tell the federal government to go pound sand.
Thank you, Mr. Kelley. Mr. Markey.
As an advisor and a business owner, I look at this from a different perspective. If we make our state independent of federal funds, that doesn't mean we can't take them. We just want to make sure we're not dependent on them. So allow the federal government to give us their money because it allows us to use our money in other ways. We can still be independent of their thinking. And this isn't the party of cancel culture. This is the party of seeing problems and fixing problems. That's why we don't abolish it, we fix it. And when we start abolishing things, what we're telling the other side is they can abolish the same things if they get in charge. And we've got to get rid of this idea that we're going to fix things through executive orders because the moment you're not in office, what's the next candidate going to do? They're going to undo everything. Just like every candidate up here says that they're going to undo all of Governor Whitmer's executive orders. Guess what? If you rule through executive order, everyone will keep doing that. And then you get the illusion of progress. So what are we going to do? Number one, like else has talked about, we're going to get critical race theory out of our schools. Number two, we're going to make sure that parents, not bureaucrats, but parents, they have the biggest choice, the biggest voice in their kids' education. They should have that. But let's talk about some real ideas we can put in place. Let's get some of the best teachers in the country. So how do you do that? Why don't we start giving tax credits to teachers, K through 12 educators, to attract more teachers? Why don't we start giving tax credits to individuals who contribute to the schools? If you give $500 in supplies to the schools and that you're helping the school, there should be a benefit to do that. And when we talk about vouchers, let's be serious here. There are a lot of good schools, but there's some really bad ones. And the bad ones are habitually bad. So when we start talking about the dollars following the kid, we got to make sure that our good public schools do not get punished for that. It's not a simple answer, but you cannot fix this through executive order. You have to fix this together. Thank you.
Now, thank you, Mr. Markey. Mr. Rebandt.
If I could just respond to Mr. Kelley's comment just a moment. I would just say that just because he hasn't heard me talk about lowering property taxes or doing away with property taxes, it doesn't mean that I haven't said that. So I'd just like to correct that. I did not get that idea from him.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next question. This one will start with Mr. Rinke. This last week, we saw devastating impact of yet another school shooting in America. We're reaching the 6-month mark since Oxford High School here in the state of Michigan. What do you want to see done as governor to protect children in schools?
Rinke's mic is the only one that's working.
Absolutely a tragedy. Every person in this room has seen or had their child go to school. And the thought, I'm looking at a little baby right here laying in his lap, the thought that she wouldn't come home is a tragedy. And we talk about protecting our schools. We need to put in real solutions, single point access. We need to have people who are trained that can defend those schools. I would look to former military to see if they would become interested in hall monitors. I grew up in the public school system. We had armed police officers in 1979. This isn't true. What's changed is the people and how they approach things. So we put single points of access. We put screening. We protect our children at all cost. That doesn't mean that we shatter the Constitution. I will defend the Second Amendment the same way I will defend our Constitution at all costs. It's what makes us great. We need to fix the people, and we need to fix the process. There's a single entrance to a bank. There's a single entrance to a courthouse. They're all protected by people with guns. Why aren't we protecting our kids the same way? There's evil out there, folks. And taking guns away from law-abiding citizens like Gretchen Whitmer's proposing and like the federal government and Joe Biden are proposing is not the solution. The bad guys aren't going to give them up. So we need to take back our schools. We need to implement those tough decisions that are common sense decisions that will protect our kids and their futures so they can be here sleeping instead of listening to guys up on a stage. It's a beautiful thing.
And Mr. Soldano, yeah, I'm hearing on this end of the table only Mr. Rinke's mic was working that time. So something with you guys at this end, but
Is it working now?
you're good to go. Yes.
Okay. Just like Kevin said, my goodness gracious, when you see any of these school shootings, you just pretty much want to vomit. Couldn't imagine as a parent getting that phone call or hearing that. But again, you can always see the Democrats and what they do with every tragedy. They always trying to take ground, nonstop. And I agree with Kevin. Hey, look, it's school security. It's one-point entry in the parking lot. It's arming these teachers if they choose to be armed and giving them the proper training, right? It's doing the common sense solutions. But we can't just look at this and blame the guns, because if you look at the horrible, evil person who shot up this supermarket the previous week, that was in New York. And then we look at Shotcago, that's what I call it, because of how many people get shot in that city. Those are the most restrictive places for guns in the nation. So we don't have a gun problem, folks. What we have is a culture problem. We have a mental health crisis problem. And we have a social media problem. And so these are the things that we need to address. It's so easy for the Democrats to take the check engine light and just unplug it and think it's going to solve everything. And that's what they feel that they're going to do with the Second Amendment. We do not need a permission slip for our First Amendment. You do not need a permission slip for the Second Amendment. I will always stand up for the Second Amendment, and we will get constitutional carry done in the state of Michigan. But we have to address the mental health crisis in this country. And the very mental health crisis that our so-called governor put not only all of us, but our children through. And it's going to take, unfortunately, decades for the amount of money that we need to spend on these children and adults to get through what that has happened to them over the past 2 years. But we need some common sense solutions again. And that's what we're going to bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dixon.
We've had some serious tragedies over the past few years, and we've experienced one in Michigan. And it is absolutely devastating to see these school shootings occur. We've heard people say that this is a problem that has no solution because two sides can't come together. Well, in Michigan, in 2018, a safe school plan was presented by the state police. If that had been implemented, it's likely that Oxford wouldn't have happened. We need to get serious about a safe schools plan. I know this because I drop my little girls off every day at a school, and every day I have that thought. Are they safe? Are they safe? We have one point of entry in our school. Every school should have one point of entry. Every school should have these, what we're looking at in the safe school plan, and we need to discuss what other plans we can have to make sure that school is the safest place. No more sitting duck zones where we have a gun-free zone because our kids are in there unprotected in that case. We need to make sure that our kids are as protected as the jewelry store and the bank down the street. How can our future not be safe? How can we put our kids in a situation where we don't know if they're safe? It should absolutely be our focus. And as a mom, when I see these things and I have to explain them to my little girls, and they look at me and they go, is this going to happen to us? And honestly, I don't know when I drop them off at school, but I know we can come together as a country and come up with a plan, because I have seen Florida harden their schools and make sure they are no longer a soft target. And I know that states across this country want to come together to make sure our children are safe. There is nobody that says they want our children to be unsafe, and we will do everything possible to make sure that our kids go to school and never have to worry about someone coming in those doors.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Mr. Kelley, what do you want to see to keep our schools safe?
Absolutely a tragedy when we see something like Oxford or what happened recently in Texas. Equally a tragedy is that there's 125,000 babies that are killed every day by abortion, and the left doesn't seem to care about that either. When we look at the legislation that's needed in order to keep our schools safe, we've heard a few good points here today. One point that we have not addressed is some of these early warning signs and these early detectors of kids that are possibly in a mental state where they don't want to live life anymore. They don't feel appreciated. They don't have any purpose. And we see with this whole push of gender dysphoria where children are confused. And I mean, it isn't already hard enough growing up, and then all of this on top of it. We have fatherless homes, and it continues to add all these problems. And a lot of times these students will give the early warning signs, whether it's a drawing that they have or whether it's something they post on, say, social media. I believe that every school needs to have an opportunity for, if someone sees those things, they can report it to the school so it can be followed up on. I know that the Oxford school shooting, that individual had several different things that they had put out publicly, and it wasn't addressed properly. I would like to see, instead of $40 billion to Ukraine, how about we put that money to put metal detectors inside every single one of the doors around the schools, so that as they walk in, you're not walking through a big barricade there of metal detectors, but you will be able to have an early warning detector there as well. I think those are two components that would be a great addition to us protecting our schools and offering that mental help to the students that need it before a tragedy happens.
Thank you, Mr. Kelley. Now, we're hearing that Mr. Rinke's mic is the best for the people at home, or the one you've been using. Can we just pass that one down along? We can do whatever you'd like. Thank you.
This one?
I think so. Let's go with it.
So my dad always said, locks only keep honest people honest. And so I have a problem when you look at the gun-free zones that it only keeps honest people honest. And so like Mr. Kelley, I see no problem having metal detectors in every school. I think that single point of entry is a good idea. We see it in many schools. I also think having police officers in our schools is a good thing. That's going to restore trust. When kids grow up around police officers, it's not going to be a scary environment anymore for some children when they run into a police officer. And I think this also becomes a moment, a line in the sand, because when we take this and we move this into, well, what should we do with gun reform? What is next? When you start messing with the Second Amendment, guess what the next one is going to be? First Amendment. And that's not acceptable. And so you've got people on the left that say, well, guns create an unsafe environment. I guess I think differently. No, criminals create an unsafe environment. That seems pretty simple to me. So a couple of things here. Number one, I think it's time that our leaders in both D.C. and Lansing start to support our police officers, because they're the ones who keep our communities and our cities safe. This is something we should be encouraging people to go into. And you know what? I'm going to actually end my thought here, because everyone in this room, we're incredibly blessed and lucky to be here. We don't deal with these dangers on a regular basis, and we get to go home to our families. And so I give the rest of my time just as a moment of silence for the people who are going through what they are.
All right, thank you, Mr. Markey. Mr. Rebandt, can you use the same mic?
Sure. This was originally mine anyway. I think that's a sign that I'm the best working governor up here. Friends, I would just like to let you know that when the Oxford shooting happened, it was tragic. Uvalde is tragic. I went to the Oxford visitations for Hannah, Tate, Madison, and Justin. I'm a police chaplain. I have seen death that I would never want to see, but that deeply affected me. And so this is an issue that's very dear to my heart. Friends, we have law enforcement liaison officers in the schools in Farmington Hills. I would not only have a single point of entry, I would not only have law enforcement officers or retired vets in the schools, but I would also have gun-sniffing dogs. I would have opportunities for students to have a safe space to talk to law enforcement in that school, to offer some concerns that they have. You see, the issue here is that in the 1960s, in my city in Farmington Hills, students took their guns to school. They put them in their lockers, and then they went hunting after school for deer with their teachers. What has changed? Friends, guns haven't changed. I have a 1955 Browning semi-automatic shotgun. The first patent on a semi-automatic pistol was 1892. Guns haven't changed, but what has changed is the heart and the culture of the state and the country. And unless we bring God back into the classroom, the courtroom, unless we bring him back into culture, we're going to continue to see it erode.
Thank you, Mr. Rebandt. For the next question, start with Mr. Soldano. If the Supreme Court returns the subject of abortion to the individual states as speculated, and you are governor, would you support a bill that would make abortion legal in Michigan? If yes, would you want to limit how far into the pregnancy an abortion could be performed?
Say the second part of that question again, just so I understand.
If abortion was legal in the state, what point in the pregnancy would you set as the limit?
Okay, I'm 100% unapologetically pro-life. We covered this at our last debate. We'll cover it again. My mom was adopted, and if her birth mother could have had an abortion, I would not be here. And I know a lot of the progressive left wishes that would have happened, but it didn't. And you can see Governor Whitmer, she is an extremist on abortion. And she's going to do everything that she is in her power if Roe v. Wade gets overturned to make sure that they're still killing these babies. I am about conception, and if I don't know if you guys, who here watches The View, raise your hand. There's usually one. Okay. I got destroyed on The View, on corporate media for my stance on pro-life. I was on the Washington Post, MSNBC, because I went on there and I talked about from conception, no exceptions. When in the history of our species have we ever crucified the child for the act of the mom or the dad? Never. It's a different way of looking at it. A different way. I will always stand for life. And that 1945 law that we got off the books, a lot of people say, well, it was all for nothing because the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the legislature. And it didn't matter anymore. But what do you think would happen if that 1945 law, that Emergencies Power Act, was still on the books and Roe v. Wade gets overturned? What do you think this governor would have did? She'd be using that right now. She'd be utilizing it if it gets overturned. And that's how important what you did. And that's how what you did matters. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may change the lives of millions tomorrow. I will always, always stand for life.
Thank you. Now we'll want to get that mic all the way down to Ms. Dixon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Your turn.
I am also pro-life. It's the human baby is so sacred, and I think it's something that we've learned since Roe versus Wade, what's actually growing in mama's belly. And it is time for us to stop shaming women and saying you can't have it all if you have a baby, and say we want you to feel supported and we want you to feel loved. And I remember growing up when I was in high school, them telling me, oh, you know what, this is just a procedure, it's a bunch of cells, and abortion is nothing. And then you have a baby and you go, oh my gosh, this is amazing, this little baby is so incredible. But I had an experience where we lost a baby. And at the time when we lost this baby at 18 weeks pregnant, I remember thinking, God, why did we have to go through this? And having this overwhelming calm. And I know it's because our little girl, who we named Faith, her story gets to be shared now across the state, because I had her at 18 weeks and she was perfect, and she was a baby. She had perfect little lips that I will never forget, and perfect little hands and feet. And I get to talk about this in a different way, because the idea of cutting this baby apart is barbaric. And the idea that we are not telling young women, this is a miracle, and we want you to experience this miracle, is barbaric. That you see people saying, I'm celebrating my abortion. It's a lie. They're not hearing the beauty of celebrating life. And that's the opportunity that we have as moms to say, this is the most incredible thing that you can do. And in Michigan, we are going to be so darn family friendly that you will not have to worry, because we will come around you and support you, because our babies are the future and we love them.
Thank you. Mr. Kelley, if you're governor, would you support a bill that would make abortion legal in Michigan? And if so, what date along the pregnancy should be the limit?
I love that you reread the questions for me specifically every time.
I only have to be asked 3 times, and then I learn.
Yeah, you caught on. Very good, very good. It's interesting when we see the history of, is this mic not working good now? That sounds funny to me.
Just a little bit farther from your mouth, you should be good.
Republicans were able to check the box of pro-life when you didn't really have to do much about it, right? But God is working in amazing ways right now because we are on the precipice of Roe versus Wade being overturned. That's a real possibility. And so the question that you're asking now is valid in this election cycle more so than ever before. Because when it does get overturned, we have to make those decisions on where we stand on the pro-life issue. And I absolutely support legislation that upholds that a new life, a new body, and a brand new strain of DNA starts at conception. And abortions from there forward are illegal. And respecting life will change everything else about our society. It is sad to see, since Roe versus Wade, the culture shift that has happened when we have individuals growing up thinking that it's just a way of birth control. And that fight, we also have to understand that will come to our doorstep, right? Whether it's a BLM Antifa protest or, these radical left-wingists that show up. Democrats fight tooth and nail for the things they believe in, even if they're believing in killing babies, right? Republicans have to understand that the reality of Roe versus Wade being overturned and us standing up for pro-life, this is that time we must stand up to the left because they will come after it to protect this right that doesn't exist for them. And I want you to know I've already stood up to the radical left and I will continue to do it. And I encourage us all to have the power of God behind us to do it.
Thank you. I'm told the mic you just used, Mr. Kelley, pass that one. Sorry, it's very confusing. We need to label these things. I'm told that one worked, so we'll pass that one to Mr. Markey.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm the same person in front of the curtains as I am behind the curtains, even if that's unpopular. And so I think life starts at a heartbeat, and I would allow abortions until then. I would also have exceptions for rape and incest. And this means something to me. My oldest, when he was born 11 pounds, 11 ounces, 22 and a half inches. He was a giant chunk monster. They delivered him, they handed him to me. I walked right out the delivery room. Apparently that's not a good thing to do. I didn't know that. And so you see these nurses running right after me. What I didn't know is he had a problem. He had a hole in his heart, had respiratory issues, he had sugar issues. And the nurse walked in our room later that night, asked everyone to leave. I should have known it was a big deal. She sat down, pulled up a chair, looked at the floor for what seemed like an eternity. And when she finally looked up and made eye contact with us, her eyes were filled with tears. And she said, if your son stays here tonight, he will not survive until morning. And so then she said, there's 2 choices. You can send him to the University of Michigan Hospital or Toledo Children's. Of course, I'm a Michigan fan, so I said, let's send him there. And then I thought better. I said, which would you choose? And she goes, Toledo. I'm like, seriously? Are you sure? It's in Ohio, right? And she goes, no, that's where I would send him. And so for the next week, we fought. And we prayed, and I told God, I understand if it's not your will, but I don't really understand. And, if I'm being candid, I probably said some words that I probably shouldn't have. But I think when we talk about abortion, we have to talk about this bigger. It cannot just be legislate morality, because murder is unequivocally illegal again. It still happens. If we're truly pro-life, we have to start changing people's ideas and concepts. We need to make it change what people are thinking. So as an example, in sex education, start having people share. I had an abortion 20 years ago, and it's the worst day of my life every single year. Let kids start understanding how that's going to change their life in a bad way. Have somebody come in and says, adoption changed my life. We were able to have a child we never would have been able to have. We need to modify behaviors and change the way people think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Mr. Rebandt.
Just to comment quickly, if you have not seen the movie Unplanned, I do have 30 of them free today. Please take one home. It will certainly enlighten you as to the dangers of abortion and the horrors of it. Also, Father Frank Pavone from Priests for Life has endorsed me as his candidate for governor. I wanted to offer that as well. But friends, this is not just a talking point. This is a serious issue. In Psalm 139, it tells us that God wove us in our mother's womb. It tells us in Jeremiah chapter 1 that before you or I were ever born, God knew you. He had a plan for your life. You see, when we look at this issue, it's not just a single voter issue. The reason why we went through the last 2 years is because if someone like our governor thinks it's okay to murder a baby in the womb, she won't have any trouble taking away your rights and your liberties. That's how serious this issue is. My friends, it's a racist issue. 55% of abortions are performed on African American children, and they only make up 10% of the population. Are you kidding me? Folks, I've been, and I hate to throw this out, keep saying it. I've been a pastor for 35 years. I've talked to women who have considered an abortion. The ones that did regret it. 100% of the women who did not go through with an abortion are very glad that they did not go through with the abortion. You see, we live at a unique time in history right now. Many of us in this room have been praying for this moment from the Supreme Court and for Michigan. And I can guarantee you that we've only had one pro-life governor since Roe versus Wade, and I can guarantee you that I will stand on this issue from life, even in the nursing homes, and also to natural death.
Thank you, Mr. Rebandt. Mr. Rinke.
I often think that people who promote abortion are hypocrites because their parents made a choice, and that choice was life. I'm pro-life. I think it's the right thing. Democrats in our country today are promoting abortions up to 9 months, and recently in California and New York, actually put legislation in that would allow an abortion 28 days after the birth of a child. Yes. Proposed. These people are sick. They are evil. You're right. I'm against taxpayer-funded abortion, and will make sure that Michigan taxes do not ever take another baby's life. I'm going to be a grandpa a week before the primary. First kid. My son-in-law is paralyzed from the waist down. The fact that my daughter can have a baby with him is a miracle. And I think that we need to start looking real closely at the beauty and the value of life and what it does for our country, for our families, for our communities. Michigan is one of the highest abortion states in the country. Over 20,000 fetuses were aborted last year. It should break all of our hearts. Yeah. I'm pro-life, and abortion needs to stop.
Thank you. We'll head down to start with Ms. Dixon, right? For the next one. This is a very Northern Michigan Upper Peninsula focused question, but it impacts the entire state. Line 5 crosses 290 rivers and streams, many of which are interconnected and flow into the Great Lakes. It also supplies 65% of propane demand for the UP and 55% of Michigan's statewide needs. Most people are in support of the construction of the tunnel project, but the debate is on what to do between now and the finished tunnel. Where do you stand on the short-term plan of Line 5 through the Mackinac Straits, and what other incentives would you support to protect Michigan's lakes and ecology while simultaneously increasing recovery of Michigan's economy?
What was the last part of the question?
How else do you balance the economy and the environment when trying to expand Michigan's economy?
When we look at Line 5, this is a great option. We have the company offering to build this tunnel and put the line into this tunnel and then gift the tunnel to the state of Michigan. So it sounds like a pretty good option. In the meantime, all of the environmental reports show that Line 5 will be safe until then. The government has been presented with this, and that's why all of the permits have been made and said, yes, we can move it when that time is here. So the idea that we've been told that Line 5 is unsafe is not accurate. Now, when you talk about what Line 5 provides to this state, you'll hear Democrats saying, oh, if we got rid of Line 5, it would only be about 10,000 jobs. First of all, I don't think we can even lose 10,000 jobs in this state. But beyond that, it does provide propane. And so folks in northern Michigan, I would suspect you like to heat your homes. And as we see the price of gasoline go up, is this really the time to start messing with our pipelines? And you have a former governor here in the state of Michigan that is not standing up. But guess what? I think probably the most radical environmentalist in the world, Justin Trudeau, is against Gretchen Whitmer's decision. So that should tell you a little bit about the environment and keeping it safe. Joe Biden is against Governor Whitmer's decision. When that came down that federally this is not a good idea, Dana Nessel and Gretchen Whitmer decided to take it to a state level and try to get it shut down through the Michigan Supreme Court, which is potentially very dangerous. Because not only is this propane, but this is also jet fuel, and we'd like to actually have people doing business in the state of Michigan, so let's not have our airline prices go up any higher. Let's not have our gasoline prices go up any higher. But more than that comes out of Line 5. It's also all the starter chemicals for plastics. And what do we make here in the state of Michigan? We make cars. The idea that we would shut down Line 5 would cost us hundreds of thousands of jobs over time, and we are not willing to do that and put our citizens in danger of higher gas prices.
All right, thank you. The mic she just used. And I'll shorten the question for you, but on the Line 5, where do you see the short-term answer for Line 5 while they're building the tunnel? And then would you balance Michigan's economic needs to the environmental needs?
I've spoke with Enbridge on several different occasions to understand where Line 5's at right now and their plans moving forward. And it's an absolute baseless claim from the left that the pipes across the straits are going to cause a huge environmental disaster. There's shutoffs on both sides of the lines that go across the bottom of the straits. If something were to happen, it's being monitored so that if there is some sort of leak, they talk about the anchor hitting it, right? Those are all baseless claims that are inaccurate, and we see now the talk of the Green New Deal here in the state of Michigan. Everybody, you have rolling blackouts coming this summer, right? Because we want to shut down all of these different energy production facilities, and if we talk about shutting down Line 5, as you mentioned, 65% of the propane to the upper peninsula, 55% to the lower peninsula. As we see inflation rise, will drive the cost of that up. I support the building of the tunnel and the plan that they have to remove the pipes off the bottom of the straits after the tunnel is complete. And keeping Line 5 open is critical. It moves 550,000 barrels of oil to the Detroit refinery every month, and that goes to create a lot of different products here in the state of Michigan. I believe we need to drill more oil in the state of Michigan that can move through Line 5 and be produced so that we can, lower diesel fuel costs for trucks and for farmers across the state of Michigan. Excuse me. Line 5 is a very critical part of our infrastructure here in the state of Michigan. So in the meantime, while that tunnel is being built, I think the operation of Line 5 needs to stay open, and we need to have a governor there that will support that tunnel going in as quickly as possible. Because not only will we be able to continue to move from the upper and lower peninsula what is going through Line 5 already, 21 foot around is what is being proposed going across the bottom of the straits. There's a lot of infrastructure that you can move through that. It's very safe, effective, and it's baseless claims that there's any trouble with current Line 5.
Thank you. Mr. Markey.
I'm 100% for Line 5. We've got very smart people who can figure this out. Tunnel is a great idea. I remember a time when America was energy independent, and Michigan contributed to that. Our middle class remembers that. And so you've got Governor Whitmer here saying she fights for the working class, she fights for the middle class. But here's the deal. You know, she's saying that we need to make Michigan carbon neutral by 2050, and one of the ways to do that, she offered, in her first budget, she wanted to offer thousands of dollars in tax credits to people buying electric vehicles that cost over $100,000. Sorry, that's not for the middle class. And remember, this is a time when the middle class is getting hammered with inflation. They're having a hard time putting fuel in their tank, food on the table. They're sitting at the kitchen table trying to figure out what things can they continue to afford. So we must pay attention to energy. We must keep it open. So what would we do? Number one, the first thing we'd do is shift our focus away from being carbon neutral by 2050 and make our focus to be independent of federal dollars by 2040. We'll continue to take their money. I just want to make sure we're not dependent on it. That's the best way to protect the rights and liberties of the people in Michigan. Number two, we would suspend the gas tax because Michigan families right now, they need that. They are struggling. And number three, not a popular opinion, I would add extra cost registration fees to our electric vehicles because our electric vehicles are contributing to the disrepair of our roads. Yet they do not equally contribute to the repair of our roads. So you look at these policies, these are not policies and legislation for middle-class families. They are policies for elites, policies for upper class. You want to make Michigan number one like I do. It's on my bus. I didn't bring it here. Memorial Day, Traverse City, bad idea. But you want to make Michigan number one, you do it by focusing once again on the middle class.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Mr. Rebandt.
Could you repeat the question for Ryan? Just kidding, Ryan. I got to have a little fun. Hey, this whole issue of the Line 5 pipeline, a governor has to be able to see the big picture. Remember, I've been saying that. And the big picture that Whitmer's missing is what is going on worldwide. Actually, she's not really missing it. She's part of it. She wants to make our country and our state subject to globalism. You see, a nation's sovereignty is dependent upon its fuel source. We have everything we need in America, everything we need in Michigan to keep us independent of China and any other foreign source that we need. I took a personal tour of the Enbridge facility, and I can tell you right now, to answer your question, that the pipeline right now is 1.5 inches thick of steel. And it's under 40 pounds of pressure going through that. If somebody wants to worry about something that's dangerous, they should worry about their gas tank. That's so thin, and it's so much more volatile than what's going through that pipeline. In fact, I wouldn't take any other precautions right now because the Coast Guard got involved when that anchor hit a few years ago, and now there's this huge safety factor that when a freighter crosses a 10-mile distance on either side of that line, it sets off an alarm to the people who are in the office. And then they begin to check out the anchors on these boats and freighters as they're coming through. Folks, I will say this, that one of my philosophies as governor is that the people who the decision affects the most should have the largest say in that decision. I would never leave the Upper Peninsula without heat. And to have Whitmer miss the most significant point, that if you're going to shut down the pipeline, you have to send 1,000 freighters across the bridge to make up for that. Think of the impact on the environment on that. She's missing the big picture, though she's a part of it.
Thank you. Mr. Rinke.
Let's start Line 5 today. It's the right thing to do. Most people don't realize that in the negotiations with Enbridge, that they're going to give the tunnel, when it's completed, to the state. It's free to the people of Michigan. Potentially, it provides a 28 to 32% reduction in the cost of living of the services that it carries for the people north of Midland. The value is immeasurable. But let's take a look at a few things. It creates 33,000 jobs directly associated to the line itself for over 8 years of construction. It's estimated to bring $20.8 billion in economic impact to the state. It's estimated to increase our GDP $8.3 billion. It's estimated to bring $265.7 million of tax money to the state that was not being collected. And this governor can't figure out it's good for Michigan? What the heck? That's not leadership. That's kowtowing to the left. Electric cars aren't the answer. Windmills aren't the answer. And oh, by the way, Fossil fuel is what it takes to create the electricity for all the electric cars, and they forgot about that. Guys, be scary. Look at the Wall Street Journal today. They're calling for rolling electric blackouts in Michigan this year because our grid system can't handle electricity. Let's put in line 5. Let's start now. Let's do it right.
Thank you, Mr. Rinke. Mr. Soldano.
Isn't it funny, just several years ago, we were energy independent underneath President Trump. And Michigan can be that powerhouse of the union. We have so many opportunities to be energy independent in this great union. Not only do we have the largest gas storage capacity in the union, but we also have the potential to put in a few reactors. That's what needs to focus on right now going forward. Hey, look, we all can agree that having a line on the bottom of the state or of the lake is, we don't want that. We don't want an oil spill from accidents or anything else. It would destroy not only our natural resources, but it would just be catastrophic to all of us. But they built a common sense solution. It's the tunnel. It's the tunnel. And the sad part about this, and we all know what she's trying to do. Governor Whitmer, she's pushing the Green New Deal. If they would have started this right at the beginning, they would be building this thing right now. But now we're still waiting on permits and everything else, and it just continues to drag on. And what are we doing to the UP? We're just hammering down the Upers. And what's Governor Whitmer's solution? We're just going to truck propane up. Those of us who've lived out in the country, propane was expensive before this, before Biden. Now look at it. And oh, by the way, Governor, those very semis that will be trucking that propane up is going to damage the roads that you're trying to fix. Again, no foresight, no thought, and it is evil. They continue just to shame us. They continue to hammer down at us working folk for what? For a Green New Deal. Build the tunnel, keep it open, and guess what also we can do with that tunnel? We can run other utilities through that tunnel, and we can hardwire the UP with broadband and attract even more jobs, high-tech jobs. Common sense solutions. That's what we need, folks. So yes, I support the tunnel 100%, and we're going to get it done.
All right, and pass that down to Mr. Kelley, and we'll go to the last question. This one will only be 60-second response in lieu of the time running out here. The state has seen a massive budget surplus each of the last few years and has received billions of dollars in federal relief packages. What is the best plan for how that money should be spent to benefit Michiganders, whether it be rebates, tax breaks, paying down debt, or another idea?
The very best way to spend that would be to give the money back to the people it was taken from in the first place. Put it back in the hands of the pockets of the people. The government has this idea where they tax people and then give the money back to them like they're doing them a favor, right? That's the very best way that we could spend it, put the money back in the hands of the people. There are other things that we need to address, and that is transportation, our infrastructure, right? We have major problems there. The education system is not a component of that. The $18.4 billion budget that Whitmer's proposing for education does not need any more money. It needs better allocation of funds. Department of Corrections and our law enforcement officers is another one. My campaign has made an announcement to make a $25,000 investment into badge and firearm-carrying law enforcement officers for them to have a private sector pension. We need to find ways to spend that money that is going to increase the value of our state for residents to move here instead of continuing to move out.
Thank you. 60 seconds is quick. Mr. Markey.
There's two ways to give people the money back. Number one is write them a check. Number two is create better economic opportunities. So what I think that we need to do, because I do believe that we have bad economic environment headed our way with inflation and increasing interest rates, we need to encourage entrepreneurship. And how do you do that? Make starting a business tax-free to entrepreneurs for 3 to 5 years to encourage all to do that. Then what you do is you start to give tax credits to corporations that have net increases to their employee counts. But make sure that's over like a 3-year rolling period so they can't just hire people, fire them, hire them back and get a tax credit. We also need to help the middle class. How do you do that? We need, one of the biggest expenses for middle class is childcare. Let's make at-home childcares with less than 10 kids, let's make that tax-free income so we have more daycare centers. More daycare centers, higher supply, same demand, lowers costs, helps middle-class families.
Thank you. Mr. Rebandt.
Just a clarification on the tunnel first. I am in favor of the tunnel. I just want you to know that I would not do anything in the meantime while it's being built, because I think it's the safest tunnel that's going to be made safer with the tunnel, or safest line with the safest tunnel. What would I do with all that money from the federal government? Well, that's tough, because as a fiscal conservative, my temptation is just to give the money back and say, we don't want any more of your oversight and your money that you're sending our way so that you have to look at us. But what I would really do is this. I would go to every one of the businesses that Whitmer shut down. Every person who was fined, every person who gave up on their personal business, and say, here's money from your friends across America to get back into business, because we need you in this state and we need your small business.
Thank you. Mr. Rinke.
I believe in the people of Michigan, and I'm happy right now because I'm going to call on every one of these candidates to call for what I've called for, the complete elimination of the 4.25 personal income tax to zero immediately. And I challenge them, if you really want to get your money back, it's the quickest way that we can address the people getting back $12 billion of their money. We're going to make government smaller. We're going to invest versus spend money, because we do have responsibilities. See, our problem is the government's drunk on spending, and they're not accountable. We start by creating an environment for the people who are here to be successful in, and that's putting the money back in your pocket immediately. And I'm calling on you to support that.
Thank you. Mr. Soldano.
Look, I would love to cut the income tax to zero, but it's just not feasible. There was a mass exodus of people leaving the state even before COVID. Businesses, families, that's tax revenue. And that's one thing that we have to do is, number one, when you're in debt, what do you need to do immediately? You need to cut spending. So I'm the candidate up here talking about we're not going to balance the budget. We're going to cut the budget every single year. The next thing that we need to do is with all that COVID relief money, is we need to start investing into our infrastructure for our shovel-ready sites. That's why we're losing not only 11,000 jobs to Kentucky and Tennessee, but we just lost more jobs to Indiana. Why? Because we don't have the infrastructure for shovel-ready sites, and our energy's too expensive. So we need to take that money and start investing into long-term energy-dense solutions, start putting infrastructure into the natural gas storage capacity, get ready for the business revolution that I'm going to lead.
Thank you. Rinke, real quickly.
Yeah, it is feasible, folks. If I give you back $12 billion of your own money, you know what we've got? The largest budget in the history of the state of Michigan by over $8 billion. It is feasible, and you deserve to spend your money the way you want versus having government tell you how to spend it.
All right.
Mr. Rinke says we just take our budget back to 2016, so I ask everyone who shops at his automotive dealerships to ask for 2016 prices. This isn't a snap your fingers and we can make it work.
All right. While it was making its way down to Ms. Dixon for your answer. Yeah, use that mic. You've got all of them, it looks like.
Of the question of, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. From the question of how would you spend the budget, first of all, I would say that the budget should not be spent by anyone until there is a new administration in, because we don't want anybody buying votes. The only thing I would say is there is $6 billion in an education budget right now that came from COVID dollars, and I'd like to see that harden our schools over the summer to make sure that when our kids go back to school, they're safe and we can train teachers. But ultimately, I'd like to see some money going to our police officers to make sure we can make those departments more robust and bring more people in. I'd love to see our roads get fixed. This is one-time spending, though, folks. That's what we need to remember. Gretchen Whitmer is increasing the budget permanently. That's not sustainable. We need to make sure that this money is used for one-time use for the best plan for this state. Our politicians should not be able to buy votes with that right now. It's so important that this is spent the right way.
No, thank you. Thank you. That's all of our questions. No.
Can I respond to
Yeah.
Kevin's there, because he challenged the candidates? I'm not with you on the state income tax either. I have made the announcement that property taxes need to be lowered and or eliminated because the state income tax is tied directly to the prosperity of the residents. Property taxes is tied to however high the government wants to raise them over time because they can continue to rise. So it pushes elderly out of their homes, and it's not tied to the prosperity of the people. If we keep the income tax for now, the people have to do well if the government collects money versus it rising with an inflated market.
All right, thank you. If you could give the mic back to Ms. Dixon, we're going to wrap up now with closing arguments. Given time, we're going to make it 45 seconds, finish closing arguments. So go away, or take it away, Ms. Dixon.
Thank you for being here today. I just want you to know that it is an important time in our history right now. Being pro-life is very key. Like someone said, there have been a lot of people praying for this moment, and this is our time to shine. Also, energy independence. We need to bring that back to the state of Michigan. It's so important. That is my plan. We also need to make sure that this state is financially on track and that we get government regulation out of our businesses. We need to make sure Michigan is free for you to achieve the American dream, that we are family friendly, that we are supporting parents in our schools, and that our future is decided by the people in this room and not the people in Lansing.
Thank you. Mr. Kelley.
We can all have similar talking points. We can all have things that we say, check boxes that we put on our website. But as we mentioned earlier, it's all about action. So as you leave here today, you've heard many different points from many different people, but you have to understand who is taking the action to stand up for us right now. This Mackinac Policy Conference is a perfect example. If you allow the radical left to run the show now, you will allow the radical left to run the show later. Who has taken action throughout 2020 boldly and unapologetically pushing back against this tyranny? That is the person that will boldly and take the actions needed to get our state back in line, bringing the freedom and prosperity that this country was founded on. August 2nd, vote for Ryan Kelley as Michigan's next governor.
Thank you. Mr. Markey.
Man, I thought I was going to be the first one to stand. All right, so people want to know, why do they describe you as a disruptor? I like to say I started my first business at 14. My parents remind me it was actually an elementary school. They were in Amway. They used to stock the shelves with goods down in the basement. One day I'm at school and saw an opportunity. They were selling the same stuff at school that I had in my basement. Well, they didn't like it when I started selling it because, number one, I severely undercut their price. Number two, they didn't like kids giving me money. And number three, my parents didn't like it because I wasn't paying for it. They called it stealing. I said it was part of the family. So if you think that Michigan is headed down the right path, that our status quo is good enough, then put your support behind somebody who has a history of maintaining. If not, if our status quo isn't good, you need a disruptor and a leader. That's why I'm asking you to send me to Lansing, to make Michigan #1.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Mr. Rebandt.
All the questions that were asked today are significantly important to us as Michiganders. But friends, there's a deeper issue going on in Michigan. We are fighting for the heart and soul of the next generation, and even the generation in which we live. My friends, as we look at what's before us, President John Adams said this: our Constitution was made only for a religious and moral people. It will not survive under any other. And unless we bring God back into culture, like the judges have affirmed, and I've been saying for the last year and a month or so, we will lose everything. We need to vote right this section. Let's join together and make Michigan a lighthouse to the nation.
Thank you. Mr. Rinke.
The job of governor is running the business of the state. And I'd ask you to consider, because I'm a proven business leader, we've got a governor that practiced political science versus medical science, and it's impacted all of us. She's lied about nursing home deaths. She's used us to audition for another job. As your governor, I'm going to cut big government and keep it focused on providing services for you. I'm going to end indoctrination of our children in our schools, and we're going to make elections safe and respected again in Michigan. I support our first responders, the Second Amendment. I'm going to eliminate the income tax because I believe in you. And I'm asking you to join me to make Michigan the #1 state in America. God bless you all. Thank you today.
Thank you, Mr. Rinke. Mr. Soldano.
That's one thing that's frustrating, is over the past 2 years, I've been waiting for people to stand up. and do what needs to be done. But I've said this time and time again, it's time for ordinary people now to do extraordinary things. And I think what we're all craving right now is we want leadership more than anything. A leader who's going to inspire Michigan's greatest asset, the people, to continue to be engaged, to continue to be involved, to continue to take back that lost ground. We need a leader to inspire unity. I really believe that we're so sick and tired of the division of this country. If you want to take over a powerful country, how do you do it? You don't do it with tanks, guns, aircraft carriers. You do it with division. You do it from within. And as Michigan's next governor, we will have unity, and we will inspire all of you to get involved. Thank you for having us. I'm Garrett Soldano, and I am your next governor. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all 6 of the candidates on the stage. Reminder to everyone, the primary is August 2nd. Thank you to the Park Place Hotel, for our organizers, for everyone here in Traverse City. Have a good night and a happy holiday weekend.